The Kiseki series, which is translated as the Trail series in English, heavily builds on shared plot lines and complex political intrigue across many games. So I'd like to welcome you to the next installment in the series of detailed but still condensed summaries. But with that said, there's a lot to cover in the first game of the Cold Steel arc, so let's dive right in. Cold Steel literally begins with a bang. Quite a few of them, actually. A dangerous commotion is occurring at Gorelia Fortress, the Erebonian Empire's military stronghold at its Crossbell border. A group of military students and their instructors race into the fortress, only to find bloodied soldiers everywhere. It appears that a group of terrorists are seeking control of the massive railway guns in order to target the trade conference where Chancellor Osborne is currently in attendance. The students speak up that they must do something, so the two instructors each take a group with them. We follow Group A as they fight their way through various archaisms, but despite their best efforts, it appears they are too late. The railway cannons deploy and take aim as Rean screams at them to stop. Then the scene cuts to black. We rewind to 5 months earlier, where Rean is on board a train to the suburban town of Trista. Various other teens in school uniforms are seen disembarking as Rean does the same. He takes a moment to admire the lino flowers in full bloom and fails to realize he's blocking the walkway. A blonde girl bumps into him and falls, but fortunately holds no hard feelings towards Rean as he helps her up. They take note that they're one of the only 2 students that are wearing red uniforms, as everyone else is wearing either green or white. The girl goes on ahead, then Rean follows shortly after to the Thors Military Academy entrance ceremony. Principal Van Dyke opens the ceremony with a brief history of the Academy's esteemed founding. Thors was established nearly 220 years ago by the legendary Emperor Dreichels himself, the very one responsible for bringing an end to the War of the Lions and restoring peace to Erebonia. This institution seeks to fulfill his famous mandate. Arise, O youth, and become the foundation of the world. No pressure, right? Says a boy sitting right next to Rean. He introduces himself as Elliot Craig. The entrance ceremony ends and all students are directed to the class indicated in their guidebook. The only students who received no such information appear to be those in the red uniforms. Understandably, they're all confused until a friendly female instructor draws their attention. She'll explain their unique situation, but not before they complete a special orienteering exercise. A couple of students from the nobility look on as the students in red are led to an old building in the back of the school. They all enter with the instructor, unaware that a couple of second years are watching them from a high vantage point. The two are happy that their year of hard work is finally coming to fruition, though the topic quickly derails into some silly, cultured banter. 2 other students show up, then all 4 are demonstrated to be quite close to each other. Back in the old building, the instructor introduces herself as Sarah Valestein of Class VII. This catches the students by surprise, especially the number 1 scorer on the entrance exams, as there are only 5 known classes at Thors that are arranged by a student's social class and home region, while 2 are reserved for nobles and 3 for commoners. For the very first time, the Academy is implementing a new class where there is no distinction between the socioeconomic classes. This news doesn't sit well with a bespectacled boy Machius Regnitz, who believes all nobles to be arrogant hedonists. The boy next to him scoffs and finds his behavior humorously ironic. When Machias turns and addresses the blonde, it's revealed that his name is Eustace Elberea, the son of Duke Elberea, who is head of one of the 4 great houses. Before the fight can escalate further, Instructor Sarah commences the orienteering exercise by pressing a switch in the wall. It reveals a trapdoor underneath the students, who all begin sliding down. Rean looks to save the person closest to him, the same blonde girl from earlier, while a silver-haired girl skillfully avoids the trap by hooking onto the ceiling. Instructor Sarah reprimands her though, and hurls a dagger that severs the cord, dropping her down towards the rest of the students. Everyone is gathering their bearings as Rean awkwardly finds a face full of the blonde girl's chest. Embarrassed, she slaps him and resorts to giving him the silent treatment. All the students receive a call on their special battle orbits called Arcus units, which were developed in conjunction by the Epstein Foundation and Reinford Group. It's Instructor Sarah, who promises a free kiss to everyone who can make it through the underground maze and back to the surface. Eustace begins to head off alone, but Machias says he can't possibly be going off by himself. Eustace provokes the bespectacled student, turning the tables on him, which prompts the latter to proceed on his own first. Fee silently goes along right behind the 2 boys, and the remaining 3 girls decide to stick together, leaving Rean, Elliot, and Gaius as the final group. The player follows Rean and company through the dungeon. Since Elliot is not used to combat at all, he's a bit shaken part way, which allows a monster to creep up from behind. But before he's attacked, the beast is shot in midair. Rean quickly finishes it off, then the 3 turn to find that it was Machias who saved them. Machias apologizes for his rash and unsightly behavior earlier, and asks to join their group. The 3 welcome their new member, who asks if they could state which social class they're from. Elliot is the son of commoners, while Gaius's homeland of Nord has no social classes. Rean is oddly silent for a moment before saying there's not a single drop of noble blood in his veins. The group proceeds and eventually crosses paths with the girls' group. The blue-haired girl introduces herself as Laura S. Arcade, the daughter of the Viscount of Legram. The bespectacled girl is Emma Milstein, who is attending Thors on a scholarship. Finally, the blonde girl introduces herself as Elisa R. from Ruhr. She still acts standoffish towards Rean, so the girls continue on their own. Machias worries for them, but both Gaius and Rean state there's nothing to worry about if Laura's there. As the heir of the Arcade School of Swordsmanship, she's plenty strong enough. The boys eventually come across Fee, who's having no problems with the monsters here. She says they're about halfway through the dungeon before she nimbly jumps off the wall to the higher level of the maze. Shortly after, they find Eustace surrounded by a pack of monsters himself, though he dispatches all of them with his court-style fencing. Eustace turns to Machias and states he's impressed. It appears he somehow found it in him to apologize and join up with the others. In response, Machias asks him what the hell is his problem. He begins to lecture about nobles again, but Eustace doesn't want to hear it from the son of the imperial governor, Karl Regnitz, the first commoner to achieve such a position. Machias defends his father, saying he earned it through merit, unlike the nepotism of nobles. But before the fight can become physical, Rean holds Machias back. Taking a moment to cool down, Machias apologizes, but does go off on his own for a while. Eustace apologizes for stepping out of line himself. then decides to accompany the party. Elliot is initially shocked that a noble would join them, but quickly holds his tongue. When they finally reach the exit, one of the stone gargoyles mysteriously comes to life. The four put up a fight, but are unable to bring the beast down. Rean is about to unleash some technique we haven't seen yet, but thankfully the three girls arrive at that very moment. Finally, Machias arrives and fires off a shot that breaks its defenses, and Fee follows up with a critical blow, leaving room for the others to strike as a blue aura surrounds all of them. Laura deals the finishing blow, then someone's clapping draws their attention. They turn to find a proud instructor Sarah, who answers all their pressing questions. The reason they were all chosen for Class 7 is due to their high aptitude with the special Arcus units that allow for combat linking, or aka the blue glow which surrounded them all. Aptitude trumps social class in Class 7, which explains the diversity among them. Finally, Sarah presents them with a choice of accepting their placement here or turning it down for the class they would have been originally placed in. Rean is the first to accept, stating no real reason but his wish to honor what his family has done to send him to Thors. Laura and Gaius are next, always up for a challenge. Emma and Elliot accept their placements and are followed by Elisa, which particularly takes Sarah by surprise. Fee says Sarah can decide for her, but the instructor won't have it. It's up to Fee to decide for herself. Fee apathetically accepts, leaving Eustace and Machias as the final two. Eustace eventually steps up, and Machias, not wanting to be outdone by a noble, also accepts his placement into Class 7. Now that all the students have accepted their positions, the principal and a familiar figure from the previous games watch proudly from above. This brings an end to the prologue. The calendar fast-forwards a couple weeks to April 17th. Elliot and Rean are about to head to classes, but find Elisa and Emma blocking the door. Still keeping up the silent treatment, Elisa immediately departs, leaving Emma to apologize and quickly dart after her. On their way to the campus, the boys notice Dormitory 2, otherwise known as the Commoners' Dorms, but are interrupted by an arrogant noble and his posse. They call Rean and Elliot a ragtag bunch of nobodies before continuing onwards towards campus. The first class of the day is given by the history instructor, Thomas Lysander. He focuses on the War of the Lions from 250 years ago and calls upon Rean to name the location where Prince Dreichels gathered his initial forces, to which he correctly answers the Nord Highlands. Elisa's attempt to help Rean is briefly shown, though she quickly turns away when he glances over. Once the day is over, Sarah reminds them that their first free day is tomorrow, before leaving them to their clubs. As it turns out, Elliot plays the violin and will be joining the music club. Gaius will become a member of the art club since he has dabbled in painting back in his homeland of Nord. Before the two leave, instructor Sarah returns and asks if someone could go pick something up for her, something very important for their class that she left in the student council room. Rean volunteers since he hasn't decided to join any clubs yet. After exploring a bit of the campus, Rean finally finds the student union building. Before he can enter, a second-year student calls out to him. The boy wishes to show him a cool trick and asks to borrow a 50 Mira coin. He tosses it in the air and quickly moves his arms, then asks Rean to guess which hand he caught it with. It turns out that it didn't land in either hand, but in the guy's open bag below. He compliments Rean on catching on quick, but picks up the bag and walks off without returning the coin. Next, Rean is welcomed into the student council room by a tiny girl. Surprise, surprise! It turns out that she's the student council president. She hands over 9 student notebooks, one for each member of Class 7, and apologizes for the long wait. The special curriculum has taken a while for her to record. Even though it should have been Instructor Sarah's sole responsibility, Toa helped her out since she, apparently, always seems so busy. Toa actually helps out all the instructors on campus though, giving Rean the impression that she's much too kind for her own good. However, Toa begins thanking Rean for volunteering to help out with the student council. She's heard the news from Sarah, news that demonstrates just how sly the instructor is. Since he doesn't answer right away, Toa begins to apologize, thinking she's misunderstood, but Rean ends up agreeing to help the student council for the year. By the time he leaves, night has fallen upon the academy. Instructor Sarah gives him a call, thanking him for his help and also congratulating him on his little date with Toa, who had kindly treated him to dinner. With all this thrust upon him, Rean can't help but ask why Sarah chose him for this. She reveals her belief that he's the center of Class 7. He's not necessarily the leader, but he is in a special position among all his classmates. She downs some beer to Rean's chagrin before encouraging him to go with the flow for a change. He better lay some roots down somewhere before he's blown away. He heads back to the dorms after hanging up. Rean starts visiting everyone's rooms in order to deliver their student notebooks. Since he's only close with Elliot and Gaius at this point in the game, they are the only two to invite him into their rooms on his rounds. Everyone else receives their notebooks quickly before calling it a night. Rean starts off the first free day morning by picking up the tasks assigned to him by the student council. He helps Colette find her notebook and delivers some packages for George, the student engineer at Thors. As thanks, George gives him an orbital radio. Score! Last up is Principal Van Dyke's request to conduct further investigation of the old schoolhouse. While the place has been used as training grounds for students in past years, there are now strange reports of doors mysteriously appearing and disappearing, as well as some eerie voices. Before entering the building, Rean calls Elliot and Gaius for backup. They enter only to find a door that wasn't present before. The layout and monsters on the floor have completely changed as well. A difficult foe appears at the end of the maze, but they eventually defeat it with the power of their combat links. A warp device activates, allowing them immediate return to the entrance of this maze. The three report back to the principal and Sarah and are told that the old schoolhouse dates back to the Dark Ages. Strange magic and technology that is no longer understood by current society was prevalent all those centuries ago, so they'll just have to keep their eye on the building during this school year. That night, Rean practices his sword techniques, then pulls out the orbital radio from George and tests it out. The first station he turns to introduces the show Aben Time, the host of which has a truly ASMR-worthy voice. He leaves it on in the background as he studies. Fast forwarding to Wednesday, Class 7 must complete their first practical exams. Sarah calls Rean, Elliot, and Gaius forward as a team to face a strange machine called a combat shell. After all groups pass the exam, Sarah announces the surprise task in their curriculum. They will be sent on field studies, activities where they will be split into 2 groups and sent to special locations. For this month, Rean is placed with Elisa, Laura, and Elliot. As for the other group, it looks like trouble that Machias and Eustace have been placed together. The morning of their departure, Rean is the first one to arrive in the lobby. Elisa is next, prompting the two to engage in some awkward small talk before they both apologize at the same time. Elisa is shocked that Rean is apologizing to her, since it's her bad that things haven't been cleared up yet since that first day's incident. She sincerely apologizes for slapping him and thanks him for trying to save her. Then she extends her hand so they can officially make up. While they shake on it, Elliot and Laura arrive. Both are happy to see that Elisa and Rean have cleared the air.
On the train, Group A is discussing what they know about Keldic, a town known for its grand market, when Instructor Sarah decides to show her face. She settles down in the seats across from them and immediately falls asleep. To help pass the time before arrival, the group plays Blade with each other. Before long, they step foot in a quaint windmill town. Sarah parks herself at the bar to partake in Keldic's famous brews, all thanks to the locally grown rye, right after showing the students to the inn. Unbeknownst to the group, a man in an elegant white coat is observing them from afar. The inn's owner, Margot, hands the four students a field study envelope detailing their assigned tasks. Back downstairs, Instructor Sarah reaffirms that she won't be forcing their group to do anything. She's leaving it up to them to decide how to go about the tasks and their overall time spent in Keldic. The group pays a visit to the Grand Market first, and to take in all the stalls it has to offer, but they can't stay long since there's work to do. They help the orbital engineer replace some lights along the highway and exterminate monsters for some farmers. Elliot and Elisa are quite pooped after completing the day's tasks, though Rean and Laura seem fine. Rean's home is in the countryside after all, and with all the training Laura does, this level of exercise is no problem for her. Upon returning to the town, Group A hears a distant commotion in the direction of the Grand Market. Two men are fighting over a stall in the center of the area, and Laura and Rean need to step in before the fight becomes physical. Fortunately, Market Manager Otto arrives just in time to hear the men's grievances. He thanks Class 7 for dealing with the situation, then invites them to his home. Here he explains his decision to have the two merchants take turns sharing the stall, since both their permits appear to be genuine. Whoever is unable to use the front stall on a certain day will have to make do with the reserved stall in the back of the market square. Laura raises questions about this situation, since it's up to a province's ruling lord to issue market permits. In Croydon Province's case, that role belongs to Duke Alberea. Manager Otto reveals that the Duke significantly raised the sales tax on the Grand Market a couple months prior, an action that has caused many merchants to become desperate. Otto has even visited Bereahard on multiple instances to petition the Duke's household, but he has been turned away each time. Furthermore, prior to the increased sales tax, the provincial army would have reliably intervened during that sort of scuffle between merchants. You see, it's the provincial army's job to maintain the status quo in their territories, yet they did nothing on this particular case. It looks like they intend to turn a blind eye to the market as long as Keldic does not accept the tax increase. Otto has even heard as much in passing from the leading officer at the guardhouse. He stops himself there though, apologizes for laying such troubles on students such as them, then bids them a good night. The group crosses paths with Instructor Sarah, who's now off to Parm to whip Group B into shape. She advises the four to put their heads together and think. They'll figure out what to do. Then she heads off to board the next train. The students are chatting after dinner when the topic returns to the novelty of Class 7 and the true purpose behind its founding. Testing the Arcus units can't be the only reason, otherwise there would be no need for such variety in their field study tasks. Not to mention, each one of them has a different reason for enrolling at Thors. Laura is striving to reach the level of her role model. Elisa was seeking independence away from home, and Elliot truly just wants to study music. As for Rean, he's hoping to figure out his true self. Elisa and Elliot start heading upstairs first when Laura stops Rean. Wasting no time, she bluntly asks him why he chooses to hold back, considering his sword style is of the famed 8 Leaves 1 Blade school. Laura could identify it since those of the Arcade school study all different kinds of swordsmanship. Furthermore, her father told her that if she followed the path of the sword, she would eventually meet someone of the 8 Leaves 1 Blade. Rean rather sheepishly admits he was training under Yun Kafai for a while, but hit a roadblock, causing the master to cut his training short. He really isn't intentionally holding back, this is just the best he can do. Rean apologizes to Laura, but she says there's no need for him to do so to her, since it's up to him to sort out his troubles. With her back turned, she admits her disappointment, since she was hoping for a good sparring partner. Laura tells Rean to go join the others before heading outside to train. Upstairs, it turns out that Elisa and Elliot were watching the exchange and are worried about Rean bottling up his feelings. Group A receives the tasks prepared by Otto in the morning. Before they head off, Rean apologizes to Laura for making light of the Way of the Sword last night. In response, Laura says he should also apologize to himself, since one should live with pride in oneself regardless of their background. He's asked if he likes the sword, to which he responds that it's not so much a matter of liking or disliking it, but that it's an inseparable part of him. Laura is happy with his response, since that's all she needed to hear. Though they were exasperated from worrying about nothing, Elisa and Elliot are glad it was so easy for the two to make up. Then, suddenly, the waitress barges in with the news that 2 market stalls were robbed and destroyed in the night. Owner Margit tells the group not to worry about it, but once they're outside, Rean and the others decide to check it out. It just so happens that the same 2 men from yesterday are back at each other's throats. Both are accusing the other of destroying their respective stall when Laura asks them to calm down. To make matters worse, the provincial army shows up, demanding them to explain the nature of the commotion immediately. After hearing about what happened in the night, the officer draws the conclusion that both men are guilty. Laura speaks up, believing it premature to draw such conclusions without a thorough investigation, but the officer states that they don't have the time for such nonsense. He then makes the squabbling merchants an offer. If they cease their dispute, they can avoid arrest, leaving the merchants with no real choice. Rean's group realizes that this is the provincial army's way to sweep this terrible incident under the rug. Once the troops leave, everyone helps the 2 men set up what's left of their stalls so that the Grand Market can actually open for the day. Shortly after, the students find themselves back in Market Manager Otto's home. It has become obvious to them now that the army has no intention to solve this situation. This can't be good for the Grand Market's reputation, since people are sure to start boycotting the place if word about these instances gets out. Rean sits silently for a moment before asking Otto if he'll allow them to investigate the incident. The 4 of them are students training for the military, so they can't just stand by in this situation. Elisa is willing, but says they should ask Instructor Sarah first. However, it looks like she already told them her answer before she left yesterday. Put your heads together and think. The group is convinced and decides to proceed, much to Otto's appreciation. He only asks that they do so carefully, since he is in charge of their safety. The group finishes up their field day tasks first, such as returning a lost wallet to a young pink-haired lady. Then they begin their investigation, starting with collecting any witness testimony. Unfortunately, there were no witnesses to the crime last night, though it makes little sense that either merchant is the culprit, since one wouldn't destroy their own goods in the process. The only truly suspicious party is the provincial army, since they did get involved only to the extent of making sure the Grand Market commenced for the day. Thanks to Elliot's smart thinking, the group is able to get the provincial army to mistakenly admit they know more than they let on that morning. The 4 put their minds together and deduce that the provincial army would likely have access to information about the merchants since they're the ones who issue the permits. In fact, it's most probable that these 2 merchants were set up to be examples and were deliberately issued permits to the exact same stall. The Duke's office is likely trying to wear down the merchants' spirits so that the Grand Market eventually withdraws its petition for lowered taxes. Scoping out the town for anything suspicious, they spot a drunkard near the outskirts. It turns out a provincial official just fired him from his ranger job at the nature park out of nowhere. To add insult to injury, last night he spotted a bunch of kids in ranger uniforms carrying big wooden crates out the western exit of Celtic. With this tip, Rean and the group head out to Lunaria Nature Park. Elisa finds a bracelet that matches the description of the stolen goods right outside the gate, so Rean uses one of his 8 leaves 1 blade techniques to break the lock. The 4 students eventually find a group of men with the stolen goods in the back of the park. But of course, the fake park rangers aren't going to relent that easily. They pull out their guns and engage the students, but are defeated in the end. Rean and the others demand that they apologize to the merchants, return the goods, and revealed who hired them. But Elliot strangely appears to have noticed something. Apparently, he picked up the faint sound of a flute. Then, out of nowhere, an enormous beast charges into the clearing and attacks. Thankfully, the students are able to put it down, though it brings even Laura to her knees. She is the first one up, though, and compliments Rean on his newly demonstrated sword technique. Their victory appears short-lived, though, since the provincial army arrives at that moment and surrounds the students. By Adios' blessings, however, the railway military police shows up just in time to put the provincial troops in their place. The latter curse their luck that one of the Chancellor's dogs just had to show up here, a woman known as the Icy Maiden. Since Celtic is a major stop in the Empire's railway network, the RMP has every right to intervene in these matters. The woman takes over from here and places all the responsible parties under arrest. She finally introduces herself as Captain Claire Revelt of the RMP to the students. Then she asks them to accompany her back to Celtic to help her file a report. Market Manager Otto thanks the 4 Thors students for all they've done, and Captain Claire says they should be proud of themselves. Furthermore, she'll be leaving a number of her soldiers in Celtic to help clear up any loose ends. Otto does ask her to be mindful of the civilians, however, since even though the RMP is different from the provincial army, the presence of Erebonian soldiers can still spark some anxiety amongst the townspeople. Then Instructor Sarah arrives and addresses Captain Claire rather passive-aggressively. The RMP just happened to show up at the perfect time. Perhaps they had everything figured out in Celtic all along, to which Claire responds that Sarah overestimates her abilities. She merely received a report that trouble was stirring in the area. Claire bids them all farewell, with Sarah and the students departing Celtic right after.
On the train ride home, it seems like Rean and the others finally understand the purpose behind their field study tasks. It's to experience, with their very own ears and eyes, the important places in the Empire that they would otherwise only learn about in textbooks. The ability to observe carefully and make swift decisions is being trained as well. Instructor Sarah, who they all thought to be fast asleep, confirms as much. Rean has another epiphany and realizes that this purpose sounds pretty similar to what bracers do. This is rather significant since nearly all bracer guilds have closed down within the Empire. Caught off guard by such a deduction, Sarah feigns going back to sleep. Finally, Rean wishes to come clean regarding his social class, since he's dodged the question before. He actually comes from a family of nobles in Ymir. The Schwarzer family is close to the imperial family, despite the head Schwarzer being only a baron in name. It turns out Rean was adopted though, so it is true that he has no nobility in his blood. Now that the 4 of them have gone through so much over the past couple days, he wanted to share this aspect of himself with them, since they will all be a major part of his life at Thors. Sarah silently ponders the beauty of youth, while still contemplating what could possibly be in store for the future of Erebonia. A bespectacled man and masked man are observing the train pass from the rural outskirts of Celtic. They weren't expecting the Icy Maiden to show up when she did, but it's given them a valuable glimpse into how their main opposition, the RMP and the Intelligence Division, operates. They agree to proceed with their objectives as planned, then promise that they will put an end to the tyrant's injustice and ambitions. The masked one is seen walking away, bringing Chapter 1 to a close. Fast forwarding to late May, Instructor Neidhart is reviewing how orbital technology has revolutionized the way wars are waged. Orbital communications have played a particularly important part, what with the advent of transmissions in real time that has allowed for more accurate strategy and tactics. Later in the day, the girls participate in cooking class, while the boys learn about orbital computers. Elliot, Rean, and Gaius are crowded around one computer in the back when they are approached by a boy from Class 1. He introduces himself as Patrick T. Higharms, hailing from one of the 4 great houses. Paying no mind to Gaius or Elliot, Patrick extends an invitation to the Noble Salon in the Student Union building to Rean. The latter quickly tries to scrap together some sort of excuse to turn him down politely, but thankfully Eustace comes to his rescue. Eustace finds this a strange place for a son of the High Arms to be recruiting people into his faction. If he wanted the company of nobility, wouldn't it have been proper for him to ask Eustace first? Patrick is frustrated with the Alberea boy since he has already asked him plenty of times, yet was turned down each time. Once Patrick returns to his seat, Rean thanks Eustace for stepping in, but it appears the latter was merely trying to make up for the trouble his family caused in Celtic the month before. Once classes are dismissed for the day, Elisa approaches Rean and looks like she wants to ask him something. She backs out in the end though, and leaves before she can get the words out. Laura graciously extends her help when it comes to the old schoolhouse investigation tomorrow, then Machias and Rean are the only ones left in the room. Rean attempts to speak with him, but Machias overheard what went on in Orbal computer class today. He makes it clear that the fact Rean lied to him is something he can't forgive. Then he departs from the classroom. Emma returns right during this awkward moment since she forgot the notes she needs for tutoring fee. Before exiting the room, Emma tells Rean not to worry and reassures him that she doesn't think Machias hates him. As long as he explains the truth, she's sure he'll understand. Later on in the library, it turns out Fee never showed up for study lessons, so Emma asks Rean to send her over if he happens to spot her. It turns out that the silver-haired girl was napping outside the old schoolhouse. She says that the interior of the building has changed a lot again, before heading off to tutoring lessons. Lastly, a familiar guy in a bandana stops Rean on his way back to the dorms, curious if he was able to figure out his trick. He'll return the 50 mira if he has. Rean did spot the trick, but the older boy awkwardly finds he only has 10 mira on him. Being such a nice guy though, Rean tells him not to worry about it since it is only a 50 mira coin. A short-haired girl then approaches them, telling the bandanaed kid not to leech from the younger students. She's heard from Toa and George about the stuff Rean pulled during his last field study, then introduces herself as Angelica Rogner, the daughter of Marquis Rogner, head of one of the 4 great houses. No one could have guessed this just looking at her, considering the way she dresses and her casual conduct. She hops onto her strange machine, an Orbal bike, and rides off into the sunset. As it turns out, Angelica, Toa, George, and the bandanaed kid were all in the same class last year. Then the second year finally introduces himself as Crow Armbrust of Class 5 before heading off himself. The next day marks another free day, complete with some more wholesome tasks such as tutoring one of the local Trista boys and delivering books from the bookstore to the Thors faculty. Once those are done, it's time to investigate the old schoolhouse. The team expands from 3 to 5, what with the new additions of Laura and Elisa. This month introduces the bizarre addition of an elevator-like structure, but Elisa adeptly figures out the panel's controls and they descend to the next floor. The 5 finally make it to the end of the maze and encounter 3 boss monsters. Making good use of their link attacks, they dispatch the creatures, then head back to the surface. We see that a black cat has been mysteriously observing them as they head back to report to the principal and Sarah. Principal Van Dyke wonders if these occurrences have something to do with the very Emperor Drycles himself, since he ordered the school to keep guard over the building until the promised day arrived. Before the day ends, Rean accepts Lynn's request to pick up the flowers she ordered. Just as he's leaving campus though, she rushes out to remind him if he could pick up a grand rose as well. Rean gets an opportunity to pet that same black cat on the way to the flower shop, though she eventually scratches him and runs off. Jane wishes Rean the best of luck as she hands over the grand rose, which absolutely shocks Lind when Rean hands it over to her. It looks like Lind's twin Vivi imitated her sister's hairstyle and demeanor when she asked Rean to buy the grand rose, all in some sneaky scheme to prank her sister, since grand roses are most commonly used to confess one's love to another. Lind is deeply apologetic, though Vivi thanks him for the priceless laughs. Back at the dorms, Emma takes notice of the scratch on Rean's hand, so he recounts his meeting with the black cat. For some odd reason, Emma appears terribly apologetic and runs upstairs to grab her first aid kit to treat his wound. That night, Rean spends some time pondering over how the class could help Machias and Eustace get along better. Then he switches on Aubin time to take his mind off such thoughts. Instructor Sarah calls forth a different combat shell for this month's practical exam. Rean, Gaius, Elisa, and Laura are up first, and successfully take care of the machine by utilizing their combat links. The rest of Class 7 make up the second team. Though Fee appears unfazed, the entire second group is eventually defeated. Instructor Sarah has some particularly harsh criticism for Machias and Eustace and their inability to work together. The students receive their field study placements next. Angry outbursts quickly follow when Machias and Eustace learn that they've been placed in the same group again. Instructor Sarah defends her placements, since she makes her decisions with each one of her students' best interests in mind. If the two of them believe they know better than her, they're free to challenge her. She even gives them an extra pair of hands and has Rean join their group, though even with this extra advantage, she swiftly and easily puts all three of them in their place. On the morning of the field study, Rean arrives in the lobby to find Machias and Eustace tensely standing on opposite sides of the room. He attempts a friendly greeting, but Machias reminds him that while they may be classmates, they are not friends. Emma and Fee arrive, then the group awkwardly heads over to the station. Before Rean leaves, Gaius encourages him, believing that he'll be able to do what he couldn't last month when it comes to reconciling Eustace and Machias. To combat the awkward train ride, Emma and Rean ask Eustace if he could tell them about their destination, Bereahard. Eustace provokes Machias again when he suggests they would learn more from the one who scored second on the entrance exams, with the added bonus that the said person would certainly leave out any pro-noble bias. Once again, Rean butts in before the fight can escalate. He appeals to their competitive natures and suggests they work together this month so that their group doesn't receive another failing grade like the month prior. Not to mention that the other group will surely do well. The others may even outscore them by double unless the 5 of them work together. Convinced, Machias and Eustace agree to a truce until the field study is over. With that settled, Eustace describes Bereahard as the most important city on the eastern side of the Croissant province. It's known for its prized furs and gems, and even has an entire area called Artisan Street dedicated to the craftsmen who work on producing these items. The city was developed with House Alberea at its core, making it by and large a city for nobles. As such, Eustace offers Machias the suggestion that he keep his anti-noble vitriol to himself unless he wants to become acquainted with the provincial army. A whole group of station employees rush to welcome Eustace the minute the group steps off the train, which clearly displeases him. He even informed them ahead of time that he's visiting as a mere student and has no need for their unnecessary greetings. However, even Eustace surprisingly adopts his best behavior immediately when his older brother Lord Rufus descends the stairs to greet them all. He has come to escort them into the city. Within a lavish limousine, they learn that Lord Rufus was tasked with selecting their field study activities for the month. He also finds it quite the coincidence that his own younger brother has been placed in the same class as Baron Schwarzer's son. It happens that Rean's father is an old acquaintance of his since they first met at a falconry competition in Heimdall years ago. Finally, they learn that Rufus decided to book them rooms at the hotel instead of at the Albarea family mansion, much to Eustace's relief. The latter isn't pleased that his older brother must leave Bereahard immediately after dropping them off, but any prying into the topic is immediately dismissed. Once again, Eustace finds that he must turn down the hotel staff's initially lavish preparations, and says one shared room for the boys and one for the girls is more than enough. Now the group can finally begin their field study tasks. First, they visit the restaurant that Eustace would frequent prior to his enrollment at Thors. He appears particularly close to the owner Hammond, and also surprisingly gets along with a couple kids near the train station. Their first quest involves fetching a gem for a couple's engagement ring. You see, Bereahard is particularly renowned for its precious gems, but of course, they come at a steep price. The artisan suggests a more affordable option, a semi-precious gem that is just as beautiful as the real thing. It won't be an easy task to find this dryad's tear, but they occasionally form in tree sap in the area. With impeccable timing, a man in a white coat pontificates that he spotted such a gem not too long ago. Fortunately, Baron Bleblanc was no liar, so the kids are soon on their way back to the shop when they witness a number of provincial armored vehicles entering the city. Fee identifies them as the latest in Rhineford technology that must have cost a small fortune. The mood back at the store is tense despite their find. It turns out that a count has just requested a dryad's tear in order to eat it. Machias begins raising his voice at the noble, but is stopped by Rean. Count Gorty then turns to them and threatens Machias with a reminder that a commoner can easily have his life cut short. However, the Count himself is taken aback when he receives a reprimanding from Eustace Albarea. In the end, the commoner who originally requested the gem is the only one who lucked out, and must leave empty-handed. Next up is a monster extermination request. Machias and Eustace vow that they will form a proper combat link this time, but it doesn't come as easily as they'd hoped. Their link is severed during battle, prompting both to fault the other once the beast is down. Once again, Machias immediately assumes Eustace wouldn't dare deign himself before a commoner. The not-so-dead monster takes advantage of the distracted boys and begins to pounce, resulting in injury to Rean, who tries to save them, while Fee easily takes care of the beast for good. Rean must press on despite the injury, since the group still needs to report back to Oryx Fort before the sun sets. While the others go on ahead, Emma whispers some strange language as she grasps Rean's injured shoulder. Later down the road, Eustace and Machias share a look of guilt, then turn back to ask Rean if he's really okay. Quite miraculously, it turns out that whatever Emma did mitigated nearly all the pain, though the bespectacled girl frantically states it was just some medicine she learned from her grandmother. When Fee is asked about the technique she used on the monster, though, she just nonchalantly states she's accustomed to combat. They reach the massive fort right as it's receiving what's apparently a large shipment of tanks. The provincial army soldiers even report to Eustace that the outer fortress and anti-air defenses have been fortified in recent months. On their way back, Machias finally voices what everyone's silently thinking. Why would a provincial army need state-of-the-art tanks? Eustace responds that this is merely the reality of the Empire's current situation, what with tensions mounting between Osborne's reformist faction and the noble faction each day. With the mood soured, the group continues on. Farther along the path, they hear sirens from the fortress, which is soon followed by a strange white thing flying past in the sky. Armored vehicles follow in hot pursuit, though Fee states they'll fail in catching it, whatever it was. On another note, Rean notices that his shoulder has somehow healed completely. This normally shouldn't be possible for such a serious injury, but apparently Emma's medicine was just that effective. Duke Alberea himself stops by just as the students are about to enter the hotel. Eustace hurriedly greets his father and apologizes for not doing so earlier, but is quickly cut off. His father reminds his son that he's allowed to do as he wishes as long as he doesn't bring shame to the Alberea name. In fact, he would do best to be mindful of his position. Then the limousine departs. The five are treated to a delicious dinner that is prepared by Hammond, food that Eustace was practically raised on. Everyone besides Rean is also grateful that the day has proceeded much more smoothly compared to the month prior. Soon, the conversation turns back to the troubling implications regarding the Oryx fort, when they're interrupted by none other than Baron LeBlanc again. He says he cannot fault the Duke for playing with fire, since only by doing so can he create more fireworks. He wishes them well on their final day here before taking his leave. Since he acts so stereotypically exaggerated, Eustace and Emma begin to suspect that he's not a real noble. He also oddly knew it was their final day here, though they never disclosed such information. The questions remain unanswered as the students then turn in for the night. Lying in their beds, Eustace and Rean both find themselves unable to sleep. The former is surprised that Rean has led quite a normal life away from the typical noble extravagance, despite his status. This is due to his father's, Baron Schwarzer, strong belief that lords should live like their people. Eustace turns away and reveals why his relationship seems so distant with his own father. It turns out that Eustace is the bastard son of the Duke and a commoner woman, while Rufus was born of the Duke and his legal wife. The owner of the restaurant, Hammond, is Eustace's uncle on his mother's side, but when she passed away, Duke Alberea's house took him in. Eustace is thankful to Hammond for looking after him all this time, though he bitterly entertains the thought that perhaps it's due to him being the son of a duke. Rean tries to encourage him, though he can understand why he would feel so cynically about how others treat him. It seems like he's close to his brother Rufus, though. Eustace shares that Rufus was the one who taught him swordsmanship and court etiquette, and that they've generally had a good relationship since he joined the Alberea house 8 years ago. So that explains why Eustace fights so well. Rean can tell that he learned the way of the sword from someone he trusted. But that's enough about him. Eustace asks if Rean's injury really is okay, and Rean responds that he's basically all better, though Eustace can't help but think he's a danger to himself. Looking back on how Rean sought to protect Elisa during the entrance ceremony, and how he saved Machias and Eustace today, he clearly puts others before himself. While most would sing praises of such selflessness, such a lack of natural self-preservation is abnormal, perhaps even twisted. Rean should be careful about how his actions affect others, since his selflessness can easily be misconstrued as arrogance. Pleased with their heart-to-heart, the two say goodnight and attempt to get some sleep. Unbeknownst to them, Machias was listening to their chat the entire time. The next morning, after taking a look at the tasks for the day, Machias turns to Eustace and states that they will form a successful combat link. In all honesty, he is embarrassed that they haven't been able to do what everyone else in their class has. Eustace wonders if this slight change of heart is due to overhearing the conversation about his circumstances last night. A blindsided Machias attempts to refute this, but ends up giving himself away, much to everyone's amusement. Eustace accepts his challenge and will do his best to form that link. Just before they head off, the Alberea family butler oddly arrives to escort Eustace to the house under direct orders of the Duke. Eustace is at a loss for words, but Machias reassures him that they can leave the combat link for later. They make plans to rendezvous with Eustace at noon, then the group begins their tasks without him. They find ingredients for Chef Hammond, who rewards them with a deliciously homey dish in return. He reveals that this was one of Eustace's favorite meals growing up, a recipe that was created by his late mother for whenever he came down with a cold. Machias ponders that perhaps he really didn't have such an easy noble life after all. The group also escorts good ol' Anton back from Auroch's fort to Bereahard, but not without some shenanigans along the way. Good thing his trusty pal Ricky still stuck around for him again. Now it's time for the monster extermination. Machias finally apologizes for his assumptions and the way he's been acting towards Rean. The two make up and the four successfully dispatch the beast together. However, they run into big trouble as they re-enter the city. Provincial army troops take Machias into custody on the false grounds of trespassing into Auroch's fort yesterday. Despite the other students' alibis, the three's words matter little without Eustace among them. Machias is taken away as a man in a white coat observes the group's plight. The students are told at the guardhouse that Eustace will be busy with affairs in the Duke's household for the remainder of their stay. The hotel and restaurant owned by Hammond are both under surveillance of the provincial army as well, so they dine at a small establishment on Artisan Street. Since there's no one who can help them, they have no choice but to bust Machias out themselves. Fee says their only chance is now, while he's still at the city's guardhouse. If he's transferred to the fort, they'll lose any chance they may have had. Just then, the bar owner and man who was watching them earlier loudly talk about how the sewers must be crawling with monsters now since the provincial army has turned a blind eye to them. The man wishes them good luck on their field studies as he exits the restaurant. Turns out he's a bracer named Toval, though he's barely in Bereahard now since its guild branch closed years ago. They learn about the waterways underneath the city, leading them on a scavenger hunt until they find an entrance. Emma pulls out a hairpin and makes like she's lockpicking, though unbeknownst to the others, she whispers a word and a small light flashes. The three eventually come across Eustace of all people about halfway through. He can't believe his father would place him under house arrest and detain the imperial governor's son just to keep the reformist faction under control. Duke Alberea couldn't even make time to speak to his own son after all, so he was planning to rescue Machias himself. It's great timing that all four of them reunited when they did. The students reach a solid iron door that has no keyhole, since it can only be opened from the other side. Fee says she can take care of it though. She places some odd-smelling substance on the door before backing away. It ignites and brings the entire door down in one piece. She nonchalantly states they're just high-powered bombs meant for espionage when everyone turns to her in shock. Rean recovers first though, and says they have a right to know her background at this point. It turns out that her combat ability and knowledge on various weaponry is due to her past as a Jaeger. Eustace exclaims that he can't believe he's going to school with someone essentially synonymous with the Grim Reaper before catching himself. He can't allow his prejudices to get a hold of him. Rean and Emma agree, and they thank Fee for being honest. Then they all continue on until they eventually find the cells where Machias is being kept. He can't believe his eyes, especially when Fee sneakily blasts the door open. When he recovers, he thanks them all, even Eustace in his own way. Some soldiers on patrol catch sight of them, but are easily knocked out by the students. When the other soldiers happen upon an empty cell, though, they unleash ferocious beasts to chase down the intruders. Rean and company run as fast as they can, but are quickly surrounded. Eustace and Machias realize they're being presented an opportunity to make that combat link and put a decisive end to their field studies this month. The boys successfully work together, along with the rest of their group, allowing them to defeat the two beasts. Unfortunately, the provincial army has caught up in the meantime, though. Eustace reprimands the officer, stating that he will not stand by while one of his classmates is used as a pawn in some political war and arrested under false charges. The soldiers are ordered to take them all in, Lord Eustace included, but Rufus arrives just in time to save the situation. It looks like it's all thanks to Sarah's old friend who let her in on what was going on in Bereahard. She got in contact with the Academy's board of directors immediately, Rufus being one of the 3 permanent members. The latter apologizes to Machias for the wrongful arrest. He had no idea his father would attempt something so brazenly foolish while he was away from the city. Back on the surface, Toval can see Class VII's potential and why Sarah is so fixated on them. Baron LeBlanc makes an appearance of his own and asks if Toval's other Bracer acquaintances happen to be a certain young couple from a foreign land. Before he leaves, he hopes the Bracer will give his regards to the Purple Lightning. As for the students and Sarah, they're on the train back to Thors. Rean and the others are understandably exhausted, but it turns out Group B had some problems of a similar nature, though not on the level of what Rean and the others experienced. Makes sense since Group B was sent to St. Arc, another important noble city. Fee asked Sarah about Oryx's fort, since the fortifications made there were insane. However, Sarah quickly puts an end to this topic. Right now, they're still students who should be focusing on learning from all these experiences and having fun. They can leave the truly difficult questions about what they should be doing for after they graduate. She truly believes there's something special out there that can only be learned during this time together with their classmates. There's a brief silence before all the students burst out laughing. They all can't believe she would say something so cheesy. Sarah pouts about how it's difficult being an instructor as they all tease her, though they do get the intent of her heartfelt message. Like last chapter, the party's got someone observing their train as it passes. This time, it's a small blue-haired girl, the very culprit who infiltrated the fort yesterday. She answers an orbital call as the White Rabbit and gives her report to Lecter, of all people. A bizarre levitating object appears when she raises her arm. Then Chapter 2 is brought to a close as she floats away into the distance. Hey, so it's been a while since I've done one of these trails summary videos, so I hope it was to your liking, and if it was, please spam the like button, it really helps. Big thanks to my pal February Knight who helped narrate in this video. Go check out his channel, and links in the description. Until next time guys though, take care. See ya!